I am so excited to have Cassidy Williams on our AMA. She is an absolute legend. She is a developer, an advisor, a creator, an educator, a speaker, a dev advocate, also a mother. We can't forget that one. She does so many things for the community in terms of creating and building and educating and just helping people feel a little bit more at home. Just to rattle off some of her stats, did you know that she has worked with almost 60 sponsors? That is so many sponsors, and I need to read a couple of them because they're so impressive. She's worked with ConvertKit, Pluralsight, Netlify, Figma, AWS, Redis, Docker, Cloudinary, Postman, Supabase, Retool, Hashnode, GitHub, SourceGraph, Algolia. You have worked with some of the best people in the industry. It is so impressive. And you're kind of everywhere. You have 186,000 followers on Twitter. You get 22,000 blog visits to your blog, which I think is so impressive because I feel like no one goes to blogs these days and people are still coming to yours. You've got a Patreon. You've got a great following on TikTok. You live stream on Twitch. You've written 5 courses. You've got 15,000 followers on LinkedIn. So you are just doing a lot. And I'm so excited that you are going to be here today to share with us about how you do all these things and also how it translates or maybe doesn't always translate into money.
Mm.
So let's get started. So
I
I
think
want to start
Linda asked
with,
a great question saying,
ooh,
"Is
what
it
does she
wild to
ask?
see your" she asked, "Is it wild to see your history flash before your eyes like that?" Yes. It's I was like, "Dang, I have done things, haven't
Done things. A
I?"
lot of things. Yes. So you wrote a really great blog post, I think it was a couple weeks ago now, called Getting Paid is Weird and Sometimes Hard, which
Mm.
I think is such a great title because it's so true. I have so many side hustles. I've had multiple streams of income for a long time, and getting paid has always been weird and it's always been hard. And I want to read the first sentence you wrote. You wrote, I'm mostly just typing out my feelings right now, and I don't know if this will turn into something coherent. What was the impetus for that blog post?
I was having a lot of feelings because I had a project that I was working on that I thought I was going to get paid for, and then the company that I was working with went bankrupt, and so I got paid nothing after, like, literally years of work, and so I was just like, this sucks," and so that is what got me typing.
Is that the second time that has happened to
Unfortunately, it's happened a handful of times,
you?
but yeah, this one I was particularly in my feelings about it, and I so one of the things that I made recently, which I also blogged about and made no money from, but I built a typewriter recently. It's a
Mhm.
little thing that it's a digital typewriter where I can like type things out, have no internet, and then sync to Google Drive, and it was fun. But anyway, I was like sitting in front of this and I was just like, I should just type what I'm feeling. And then this blog post was born.
Wait, did you type the blog post on that typewriter?
Yeah,
That's amazing.
it's kind of
That's
fun,
great.
right? Yeah.
Also, I feel a side note because 'cause we're both, mothers of toddlers, I feel like that's a really good, like, first computer experience for, like, a
Yeah.
two-year-old, like, no flashing screens, no colors, just, like, a little keyboard to type. That feels like a good potential, like, kids tool as well in case
Yeah,
you're thinking of other
exactly.
side hustle ideas.
Oh yeah, no, I've like let her poke at it and stuff, but she doesn't. My baby is not even 2 yet, so I'm kind of just
Yeah,
letting her
you got
poke
time.
at it. She's just like, and then tries to sit on it, and I take it away. But
Yeah.
eventually, that's kind of what I'm thinking too, where I'll be like, okay, if she wants to mess with the keyboard, she can play with that.
Yeah, yeah. So Desi Hall asks, "Where can I buy that?" Is that available for purchase anywhere?
So, I built it myself, but it's based on an open source project, and I can quickly find it because I think I have it bookmarked. Yeah, I'll paste it in the chat. It is something that I built myself, and this is the open source thing, and the creator was very helpful because he sometimes will, 3D print stuff for you, and I had him 3D print stuff for me. He's on a break now, but he's like very active in the GitHub issues and stuff. And if you want one for yourself, you could either just copy the repo or wait for him to 3D print stuff for you.
Nice. So you have had many side hustles. A lot of them you've gotten paid for, a lot more maybe you probably have not. What was the first tech side hustle that you made money from?
Ooh, I think it was. And I'm always embarrassed to bring it up. I think it was an online course I made back in 2015 with my sister that is like an HTML and CSS course.
Yeah.
And so we made it for O'Reilly, where I was giving a talk at a conference where I didn't get paid, but someone from O'Reilly was at the conference. It was just like, "Hey, you speak but well. Do you want to write this course?" And so we made this. I don't talk about this course much because even though it's probably still accurate to today, because HTML and CSS have not changed that much, um, I'm very embarrassed of it because partway through recording, I had a Chipotle burrito and I got food poisoning. And so, like, by the end of the course, you're just like, and that's how HTML tables work. Like, I was just so sick during that course. And like we ended up doing like the intro to the course and everything at the beginning and or at the end after recording the rest of it. And I just remember like I was so spunky and like well looking okay at the beginning of it, but if you look at like the intro that we recorded at the end, I was just like sweaty, like "Welcome to the course," where I'm sure it's not that bad, but in my head, I can't look at that again because it was
That's tough.
devastating.
Oh my goodness. Do you remember how much you got paid for that one?
I still occasionally get royalties for it,
Oh,
but
nice.
it's like $25 a quarter. It is
Oh,
I do not get paid that much from it. Like, I think the most I ever got a quarter for it was like $200 or something. I didn't get paid much, but
okay.
it felt cool to start getting paid for something.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. So, what was the first time you did a side hustle, a project where you realized you could have made money, but you did not?
Mm. Oh, no. Where I could have made money but didn't make money. I think it really was more my conference talks. I
Mhm.
used to just, like, pay for everything because I was like, "Oh, I'm paying to have this opportunity to speak on stage and get my name out there," and it when I realized later that I should have been getting paid for it all along, I was like, "Oh, no." And it was actually Kimberly Bryant from Black Girls Code who kind
Yeah.
of gave me the wake-up call for this, where, she and I had done an event in the past, so we had stayed connected, and, there was a point where I was invited to speak at a conference, and I saw that they said, "Oh, and by the way, we have a speaker budget." And I was like, "Oh, speaker budget? Okay, Kimberly has spoken at this event before. I'll reach out to her and ask." And I was just like, "I'm not sure what to ask for." I was thinking like 100, maybe $150. And she was like, "Cassidy," and called me right then. It was just like, "You don't leave your house for less than $1,000." And I was like, "What?" And the more she berated me, and I was just like, "I've made a huge mistake." So that was probably the biggest wake up call I had where I was like, "Oh no, I should have been paid this whole time." And that's happened to me a few times in my career where I'm like, "Oh no, I just didn't know people got paid for certain things."
Speaking is such a tricky one because I feel like there's 2 worlds of speaking. There's, like, the people who just have no idea you can get paid to speak and are just, like,
Right.
happy to be there, and then there are, like, the paid speakers who know what to ask for and know to negotiate and know how
Yeah.
to and it feels like there's a very thick wall between those 2 groups of people.
Right. I remember a mentor of mine, I had talked with her, and this was even before that. I had talked with her, and I was like, "You don't have a full-time job. What do you do?" And she's like, "Well, I speak at a lot of events. I do," and she was just talking about she's a true multi-hyphenate, doing lots and lots of different things. And I was just like, "Can you just get paid to speak at things?" And she was like, "Yeah, no, my speaker fee's like 15 grand, and so I'll do a few of those, and yeah, that covers rent." And I remember it blew my mind. I was just like, "Dang, I wonder what it's like to be in a position where people can pay your rent with talks." As I was speaking at events and not asking to be paid, not realizing I could also be doing such a thing. And yeah, it was a wake-up call later where I was just like, "Oh, what she was doing, I probably could have started doing myself, and I just didn't know."
How long had you been speaking for before you realized, like, "Oh, crap, I can get paid for this?" Like, how was it years? Was it a couple
It
conferences?
was
Like, how long was
years. It was
years?
probably at least 5 years, if not more.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So, what is speaking like for you now? What do you ask for?
Now it depends on the event. Like for like smaller community events, I know that they don't have as much of a budget, and so it's kind of just like, what can you afford? Where, for example, there's a awesome conference series called You Got This that is online, but
Yeah.
I love what they do, and I'm gonna paste that in the chat. So for them, I think their speaker budget's something like $50. I don't mind because I know all they do is just give free stuff to people, and so like that's cool with me. I spoke at the Merge in Berlin. You were there
Yeah.
too. For them, I asked for travel, lodging, and 5 grand, and
Nice.
they didn't bat an eye. And I spoke at Figma Config also with you a couple weeks later, and their speaker budget was 3K plus flights and lodging. So I think I've only ever gotten paid more than 5K like once or twice, and it was again one of those big corporate events. And I think the most I've ever gotten paid was 10K, and I've never seen that
Ooh.
again.
Ooh.
But I tried if I can get 5K from like a corporation, I try to. I
Yeah.
think this is just going to be a whole AMA of wake up calls. One that was a particularly big wake up call for me that was relatively recent. I think this was 2021. Was There was a company that said, "Hey, Cassidy, could you be like the interviewer for a special guest that we're going to have for a big corporate event?" I was like, "Oh, okay." And it was virtual. I was out of the comfort of my own home, and so I asked for 1.5K, and they're like, "Oh yeah, no problem." And I was like, "Yay, great." Then I found out the special guest I was interviewing was LeVar Burton, and I was like, "Oh, I could have asked for so much more money because they got LeVar Burton of Star Trek and Reading Rainbow to be the person that I interviewed, which was also a very cool experience. He was very nice, but still, I that was another big wake up call for me.
I think that's an important, thing to note, though. Like, just because it's a cool experience doesn't mean that you shouldn't also get paid. Like, it can be cool
Right.
and you make money. Like, those 2 can go together, you
You can
know?
do the
Like,
yeah, like you can get your name out there, but you can also get paid.
you can also get paid. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, I know that you also have a writer for your speaking engagements. Tell me what that's all about.
Right, my speaker writer, and I'm also
Mhm.
going to put that in the chat. Um, that is a speaker writer that I wrote. I'm trying to remember when I first wrote it. It's on GitHub, so we can look at the Git history. But anyway, there was a point where I was getting enough invites to events that I needed to figure out, okay, how do I filter these? And so I wrote this speaker writer where I saw some other ones and kind of just cross referenced a bunch and put it together where I basically was clear I want to have a speaker fee so that way I can get paid for the work, but also travel should be paid for, lodging should be paid for. I should have a ticket to the whole conference because you'd be surprised how many events just say, okay, you speak, but you don't get to watch the other talks, which is silly, but luckily that's less common now. And then I also wanted to be clear, like, I don't want to be the token woman on the panel, and I'm okay with being recorded, stuff like that. And there should be a code of conduct at the event. And so I did that so that it would not only protect my time and kind of weed out things, but also to try to do my part in like establishing more of a norm. And I've been kind of telling people copy my writer and use it. So everybody, please copy my writer and use it because I feel like if more events do this, it's better for everyone. Um, there was an event that I did for work several years ago where like I had to do it for work because the company was sponsoring and stuff, but they didn't have a code of conduct and they didn't do a lot of the things on this writer and it was just uncomfortable. And I
Mhm.
hated that every single panel they had was basically just all white men and then like I was kind of the token and it just it sucked. And I was
Mhm.
like, well, no wonder the community here that I'm talking to is this certain demographic or saying certain things because they don't have a code of conduct established. They don't have these sort of logistics ironed out. So anyway, having that just written down and explicit and something that like if someone says, "Hey, can you speak at my event?" I give them the writer first. Some people are just like, "Oh, sorry, we can't pay." Then I just say, "Okay, then I think we're done." Or "Oh, sorry, we don't have a code of conduct. We don't believe in that." I'm like, "Well, then it's not going to be the event for me. And I think it's helpful to kind of just establish those boundaries, both for protecting my time, but then also just again for getting paid.
So for people interested in possibly having a writer of their own, at what point in the process does it come into play? Because a lot of people speak from CFPs, right?
Right.
So you're submitting a CFP. So are you submitting the writer with the CFP? Is it when you get invited? Like
It's
where does
when
it kind of fit into the
it's when my talk is accepted. So if I submit via a CFP and it's not an invitation and they say, "Hey, we like your talk. Will you please speak?" Then I give them the writer.
Got you, got you. And I know folks are wondering how they can get paid to speak. I know that that's definitely an avenue that more people need to explore. Where do you or when are you able to start charging for your talks? Do you need to be at a certain place in your career? Do you need to have done a certain number of talks first? Is it just about being bold and asking right away? Like, how do you know that you're ready and are able to start charging for your talks?
The right time is now. Like,
Okay.
and I've learned this now where, like, I there was definitely a time where I was just like, "Oh, I should probably be more established before I do it," and I feel like that's a very common thing. Start asking now, because the worst they can say is no.
Yeah. And what about pricing? I know that this was a question, I think it was, Asia, Asia Ho asked this question about how to think about pricing, and I think now is a good place to bring it up. When you're trying to decide what your speaker fee should be, where do you begin? How do you know what your talk is gonna be worth?
I truly like it's so hard for me to decide. I've asked so many people and it's more of like an art than a science and a vibe, I guess, where like for me, I generally say like, okay, if this is a smaller event and like they have X number of sponsors or something, I try to I really try to gauge I don't have like a set number because I can't figure out what a good set number would be for myself, honestly. So once again, I if it's like a really big corporate big event, I say 5K. It doesn't matter if it's your first talk. It's because it's your time. If it's a smaller event, but still like they have like a good following, a good paid tickets, stuff like that. Especially if tickets are like more than $300, 1 grand at least, 1.5. Um, and then it's just kind of a sliding scale guessing game whenever I try to
Mhm.
do things, which is not a good hard and fast rule, but I feel like there's not a good hard and fast system out there at the moment.
No. No, and I think one thing that I would love to hear from you is how you feel asking to get paid
It's
because I don't know
terrible.
about you. It's terrible,
I
right?
hate
Isn't it
it.
the most terrible? I've been speaking for 10 years now. I almost always get paid. I've been a paid speaker pretty much the whole time, and every time it is terrifying.
It's
I'm, like,
awful.
shaking in my boots. I'm, like and my strategy is I never yeah, exactly. My strategy is to never do it on a phone call because 'cause I'm too scared.
Oh,
So
I
I'll
know,
just
yeah.
I won't bring it up, like, in a phone call, and I'll just, like, type it out later and just hit send and then just close the tab and run away and just, like, avoid my inbox for a little while, but it's a terrifying experience. Do you
It's
feel that way
terrible.
too?
Yeah, no, oh gosh, when they ask on a phone or a video, I hate saying a number on
It's
that.
the worst.
It's
It's the
I feel
worst.
so uncomfortable because 'cause I'm, like, looking at
Mhm.
their faces, like, "What
Like,
do
"Is
they
that
think?"
okay? Are you
Yeah.
okay?" Yeah.
It's it is great, though, when it's over email because, honestly, I often have, like, my husband or a friend of mine help me with the email. I feel
Mhm.
like when you negotiate for someone else, you are so much more hardcore
Oh,
than
yeah.
when you are for yourself, and,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I was, talking about this, I was just like, there should be, like, a group of people who negotiate for each other, and the more I talked about it, the more I was like, "This is what a union is." But, like,
Yeah.
it's but I think that genuinely helps where even for my newsletter sponsorship, the most I've ever gotten paid was when a friend of mine said, "Do you want me to negotiate for you? I'm just gonna try this." And then I got $3,500 for 1 issue. That's the
Oh,
most I've ever gotten paid for a single newsletter issue, and it was because she negotiated for me. And so,
yeah. Yeah.
anyway, doing it myself is terrible. I do it if I have to, but otherwise I try to have a friend help me.
Yeah. Yeah. No shame in that, that's what friends are for. So let's dig into sponsorships a little bit more.
Yeah.
I asked you sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. You're good.
Oh, so I asked you, how many sponsors you'd worked with, and I know you do a lot of sponsor stuff, so I was thinking like maybe 10, maybe like 20, but you've worked with 59 sponsors, which is so impressive. That is
Man, I gotta get to
so many
60.
companies. Yeah, almost you're almost at 60. Like that's so many people that have trusted you, right? That have said like Cassidy's legit. She knows what she's doing. I want to support her work. I want to reach her audience, and that is 59 people who see value, 59 companies who have seen value in what you do and are willing to exchange that value for cash. So I think that speaks very highly of you and what you do. Which came first? Was it the content to be sponsored, or was it let me find sponsors for this content I'm about to do? Like, were you focusing more on the creation or more on trying to do a sponsorship model for your content?
Yeah. Creation first and foremost. I originally made my newsletter in 2017 because I was working on an online course, and it's a React course on Udemy, which, very quick side note, I launched that the day before my wedding. Don't
Wow.
recommend that. I'm an idiot. But anyway, launched that and then went and got married. And for that one, I think I made like 7 grand my first month, 4 grand my second month, and then it's just kind of tapered down. I occasionally make $2 a month on that. Anyway, so I originally made my newsletter because when I was talking to the folks at Udemy, I was just like, I have a decent Twitter following, and these are the communities I'm in, and they were like, if you want to promote your course, you have to be in people's inboxes, and so figure out a way that you can get in people's inboxes. And so I was like, okay, I could start a newsletter. That could be a thing, and I wanted it to be a newsletter that I would want to read. And so I did some web links of the week. I did a practice coding question so that way people could practice for technical interviews. I added like a personal update from myself where it could be just something that interested me, some random links and a joke. And so
Mhm.
I was just like, if I stick to this format, I can make a template that I copy and paste and just kind of keep going with it. Um, and so when the course was launched, I was able to promote it, but then I kind of just kept it going weekly because I was just like, it's kind of fun, and people have
Mhm.
been responding to the interview questions, and I can like shout them out regularly. And some people have said like, "Oh, this interview question was actually a real interview question I had at this role, so I got the job." And so there were a lot of really
Nice.
cool things there where I was just like, "Okay, I'll keep this up. This is fun." And it was probably like 3 or 4 years. I've been doing it for 7 years now. It was probably 3 or 4 years until I got my first sponsor, and it was because a company reached out to me asking if I do sponsors, and I was like, "I should, shouldn't I?" I was just, like, paying for the hosting and everything out of pocket, not even considering that it could be sponsored. Because once
Yeah.
again, learning moments. And
How
so
many
that
subs did you have at that point?
that I wanna say I had around 6,000 sponsors at
Nice.
that point,
Okay.
5 or 6,000, something like that. Um, I could actually probably find the exact number, but I'll do that in a bit. But
Fine.
anyway, it was
Yeah.
it was around 5 or 6,000. Um, and this company, the first sponsor I ever had for my content for everything was Raygun, and I like them a lot as a result because it felt really cool. And so Raygun it's a company that does a bunch of like browser testing and stuff. And at that time, once again, I didn't really know how things worked. They ended up asking for a whole lot more than what I probably should have said yes to, where they wanted like videos made about them, they wanted the newsletter sponsors, they wanted social media posts, lots of things where I was just like, "Yes, wow, I'm going to get paid." And now I'm like, if they asked me for that now, I would have charged way more money than I did. I want to say they did $6,000 for like 2 or 3 months of issues plus all of that content,
Wow, that's a lot. That's a
which
lot on your part. Yeah.
it was a lot. Yeah, where honestly, like at the time, I was just like, I'm just so glad that I'm getting paid. But now I probably would have charged a whole lot more money for that because it was not only exposure in the newsletter and on my social media channels, but also on my live stream, also videos that I made for them and stuff.
Mhm.
And I think I wrote blog posts for them too, where I don't hold it against them, but it was just me not knowing what I could do and them saying like, wow, she can do all this. Great. And so that's just how it was. And so I had them as my first sponsor, and then once that was done, I was just like, "Okay, I could probably get more sponsors." And I talked to someone at Datadog, and Datadog was my second sponsor for my newsletter, and that was if Raygun was like in the fall. Datadog was probably like that February or something like that. And me not knowing, I was just like, okay, $100. And yeah, once again, at the time, I was like, this is amazing. That's gonna really just offset my costs. I'm going to be able to like go out to a dinner with some of that. Amazing. And it was $100 for a month of issues too. I did not know. I know. I messed up. I was getting $25 an issue. And then once again, an AMA of wake up calls, I was talking with someone who his newsletter, this was a bit more. When by the time I got to Datadog, I did have more sponsors because I remember I had like a little over 10,000 sponsors by that point. Um, but anyway, uh, when I had about 10,000 sponsors, his newsletter had about, or subscribers, his newsletter had, I think, 22,000. And he also had like a side podcast attached to it that was mostly just like reading the newsletter. And it was mostly geared towards businesses too, where mine was more towards individuals. I'm giving you all this context because he said, Cassidy, okay, give it to me straight. How much are you making? Give me details. And as I was saying it, he was just like, and I said, okay, what should I know? And he was like, okay, yes, my newsletter is bigger than yours. How much money do you think I make on mine? And I was like, dang, it must be a really large amount. Okay. And so I was like, $20,000. And then he laughed at me and I was like, is that too high or too low? He makes $700,000 a year with his newsletter and like the podcast attached to it. And I literally spit. And I was just like, what? I like I man, it, it hurt. It hurt deeply. And I learned I think I need help because I just, yeah, I know that's never work again money, Asia. Like it was money where I was like, are you kidding me? And he's like, yeah, no, I mean, so now I have a dedicated salesperson. Now I do all this, and so I'm able to produce more because we make so much money with it. I like I had to lay down. Um, I thought I was allergic to writing emails, but maybe not. I know. Yeah, no, I was so floored. And he was just like, here's the thing. Companies have more money than you. Take their money. And I was like, well, that's a good point. He was just like, think about how much money Datadog has. You could probably take a lot more money from them. And I was like, you're right. I could take a lot more money from them. And he was just like, add a zero, double it, increase what you can do. And so, like, it's still hard. Like, to this day, it's still hard for me to get sponsors, but I'm much less afraid and a little bit more aware of that world now. And I've been able to like quote unquote get away with things where now the minimum I'll accept, the absolute minimum I'll accept is $1,500 for an issue. And if it's a much larger org, again, the most I've ever gotten is about 3,500, and that includes me posting on Twitter and on LinkedIn and wherever else. And because it's me as like a personal newsletter, I do think it's like a blessing and a curse because when I talk to them individually, they're just like, "Oh, okay, she's going to be like an influencer. She is someone that people listen to. This is awesome." But I also found a group, they're called Buy Sell Ads. It's literally buysellads.com. They're awesome. They sell ads for me too. And I say too because I sell so much more than they do. And I think it's because people who do go to salespeople, they're just like, okay, I want the most bang for my buck. I want this many hits. I want this many clicks, that kind of stuff. Whereas for me, it's more like quality, where they are more quantity. And that's been an interesting balance where I like that I have the salespeople and they've helped me. Like this entire month of August, I haven't had to do any sales because they did it all for me and it was great. But I also, because I have to pay a commission and that sort of thing, I only get like $1,200 an issue. I shouldn't say only because it's still pretty good. I'm happy with it. But at the same time, when I do my own sales, when I've been able to do my own sales, it's pretty consistently 2,500 and up. So that's been like the balance that I'm working on right now with my sponsors, where uh, Doing sales is such hard work, and something that this person who has the big newsletter said to me, he said, people, when you ask for money, it's awkward, but if they talk to a salesperson, then that salesperson can negotiate for you and stuff. And so
It's
once
true.
again, you negotiate. And he was just like, it's good to have a person who does that rather than you, because then people are just like, what are you going to give me? And just, again, I'm still kind of trying to figure out that balance, but that's generally what I've done so far, sales wise.
So what do you think is the difference between you and your friend making $700,000 a year on that newsletter and the podcast? I know that you said that he is, had different audience, different,
Sure.
production, different, but it didn't feel like that was the key thing. What was the key difference that made you not make as much money as you could have, in your opinion?
I think so. First of all, aggressive sales. I do think that that's part of it, and he also had a very very specific niche, and I'm trying to not fully like say who they are because I don't have permission to share these numbers. So this is just
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
as transparent as I can be. But for me, it's like general tech stuff I'm interested in. I'm helping indie developers. I'm helping newbie developers, stuff like that. And he's very much like, this is a business newsletter for this specific type of business and anybody interested in this particular topic. And so I think it's a corporate niche that helps business leaders, and that's why.
Gotcha. Yeah, because it feels like the mindset feels very different, right? Like, at the end of
Yeah,
the day, it sounds from what you said, it sounds like he's optimizing for money, like, he's optimizing for
right.
dollars, and that's really what he's going for, whereas it's like money for you feels like a byproduct almost, but it's not the
Yeah,
main thing, like, it's
right.
an addition
Money
to, but
Yeah,
you
money
yeah,
is probably a nice to have where it shouldn't
yeah,
be. I'm once again, I'm learning and figuring things out. I'm thinking of money as like, "Oh, that's nice. Now that can pay for XYZ so I can make more content." Whereas he's just like, "No, this is gonna pay salaries. This is going to help my
mhm,
consulting business. This is gonna do a bunch of other things." So, yeah, I think it's your audience and how you optimize.
mhm, mhm. So if you could go back in time and do sponsorships differently, how would you approach that?
So I think if I were to make a newsletter again, I still like mine, and maybe it's just because I've been doing it for so long and I've seen the good effects. I would still probably keep it, but I would probably do a more business focused one. And I've even thought about it where I'm just like, okay, what if I made a new newsletter? How could I optimize for this? And I would probably first of all have like more of a plan of social engagement and marketing it and stuff, but I would also be really, really specific to an industry and really, really specific to the types of leaders that I want to talk to. And I think a good example of this is I think it's called Latent Space. It's an AI podcast and they have a newsletter too, that someone made online, and he made it like a year and a half ago or something, and has like hundreds of thousands of subscribers at this point,
Wow.
and I think he just got really really specific where he was just like, this is the industry I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to make sure that I'm like really discerning about who sponsors are, and I'm really discerning about who I interview on it and stuff. And he was very clear like, I'm going to say no to a whole lot, to make sure that it's really specific to this niche. And so I feel like that would be the angle that I would take if I were optimizing for money.
And at what point do you start thinking about money? Because I mean, I doubt you can get much sponsorship interest if your newsletter subscribers is like
Right.
100 people, right? Like, there kinda has to be some level of content success before a sponsor is interested in what you're doing. How do we kinda
Probably.
find yeah, how do we find that line?
I do think that there's different angles and approaches you can take, and another one that I'll use as an example that was a podcast that I did, and actually some of the people in the audience today were on said podcast. There was one that I made with Launch Darkly called the Dev Morning Show at Night, where it was meant to be like a fun kind of silly podcast where we just get to know people in the tech industry. And because I had like a vision for what I wanted the show to be and everything, I was able to kind of pitch it and be just like, this is what I want to do. This is the audience that I think we could hit. This is how we would promote your product and kind of pitch it to them, then they're just like, okay, yeah, we'll sponsor it. And I was able to get paid per episode and then also pay for producers to like handle all of it. And so that angle worked particularly well, and I could see that angle working for a newsletter as well. That being said, if they end up saying, okay, we're done, this was cool, which is what happened with that podcast, um, I, that one I really want to make it come back, but we haven't been able to find a sponsor for it ever since, and the economy has been weird. And so I see there's a question: is that one ever coming back? I hope so, but it really depends on the sponsor. And so I think there's a fine balance where if you approach it that way, then you end up relying on a sponsor. But if you kind of go content first and then prove yourself and then go, then the sponsors kind of come to you. And if you don't have a sponsor that day, you can do whatever you want. I think another really good example is TLDR. I don't know if you've seen that newsletter. That was something where a friend of mine now works there actually as a salesperson, like fully unrelated, where they have like a whole staff now where the guy who made it, he originally was just like, oh, I kind of built a system that'll just summarize the news of the day. And he started to get enough sponsors or subscribers where he was saying, okay, I could probably sell sponsors now. I have a good enough following where I kind of make it geared towards professionals. And he put a lot of like effort into like Instagram ads and stuff to try to get a lot of eyes on it. And now, and this is something where I don't know the exact numbers, and I also probably shouldn't share things, but I know the general numbers. Their sponsors, they get 5 figures a, a, an issue, 5 figures an issue, and they do an issue every day. Yeah, and so they now have
Okay.
dedicated writers who they have a TLDR web dev, TLDR AI, TLDR whatever. Too long didn't read for those who don't know it. And so as a result, they make a whole lot of money because they figured out, okay, there's the general one that we have geared towards tech professionals that people have liked. Now if we get a niche, we can say like, okay, AI companies will want to sponsor this, web dev companies will want to sponsor this. And whenever they don't have a sponsor, they either do some kind of partnership with someone where they give a free sponsorship in exchange for more eyes, or their sponsors they sponsor themselves, being just like, by the way, this TLDR newsletter is sponsored by TLDR. If you want a lot of eyes on your ad, you should sponsor, and then it has like a link for that. And so anyway, these are all very big numbers and very big business things that might be a little bit too in the weeds, but I think that there are strategies to how niche you want to be. And personal newsletters, sometimes I see them making a lot more money, and I feel like mine is like right on the edge of personal and not.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's what I have on the subject.
Yeah, so it feels like, what I'm picking up from this conversation is there's kind of different ways to approach sponsorships. There's selling your own ads, there's hiring a salesperson.
Mhm.
It feels like if you're selling your own ads, are you kind of waiting for sponsors to come to you and like notice, or can you go after them? Like how
You can
does
go
how
after
does
them.
that
So
who do you
so
who do you
I
go
made
to?
Yeah, so another really good example, there's a newsletter called Dense Discovery. And I think that newsletter is really awesome. I think it's just densediscovery.com. And they have a dedicated like sponsor this newsletter link, like peppered throughout, where it's sometimes in the a given issue more or less. And they have just a web page where it's like, sponsor, here's what you get. There's a self-serve page, or you can contact me, let me know. And I definitely based my sponsorship website page based on that, where it's not as good, honestly. I need to probably tweak it, but it's a high level like, this is the number of readers I have generally, this is the click-through rate, the retention rate, this is what you get, and it's kind of cut and dry and to the point. And so that way, if someone is interested in sponsoring or they see that link, they could be like, ooh, okay, I'll reach out. um, Otherwise, there have been times where I'll reach out to a founder I know or something, and I'll say, "Hey, I don't have a sponsor for next week. If you want, I can give you a discount for this week, and then for future issues, if you want to do it, we can talk more." And that has been fairly good for a few companies. Like I remember Mux was really awesome. Mux is a video company where I was talking with the founder and he was just like, "Yeah, your newsletter is really cool." And I was just like, "Actually, I have a sponsorship slot open this week if you're interested in it." He was like, "Oh, I need to get a budget approval." And I was just like, "If you want, I'll give you a discount for this week and you can see how it performs." And they've ended up becoming a recurring occasional
Nice.
sponsor because they were happy with that. And so that has been a helpful like sales technique. And
Mm,
so luckily I haven't had to do too much outreach. It ends up being a bit more organic, but a lot of people have come through the sponsorship page.
mhm, mhm. Nice, nice. Tell me about salespeople. That was a question that I think Vinny had.
Yeah.
What is it? I had a sponsorship-based company as well. Codenaby was my first company, and I'm pretty sure I did all the sales for that, so I never had the
Mm.
experience of working with a salesperson. What was that like? What was the agreement? How did you find them? What was that
Yeah,
about?
it was hard. I truly just went to people who I knew had sponsored newsletters. I was like, "How'd you find your salesperson?" And unfortunately, a lot of them were just like, "It's my cousin," or something like that. So that was very challenging. But it was the CodePen newsletter that turned me on to buy sell ads. And so CodePen is it's co-founded by Chris Coyer, who also made CSS tricks and has a bunch of other stuff. And he was just raving about how buy sell ads is a really good organization to work with, where you approach them as a publisher and you say, "Okay, I'm a publisher, this is my number of subscribers, whatever, whatever." And then they're honestly just really friendly. I highly recommend them. If you reach out to them, you could say Cassidy sent you. But it they said, "Okay, here's what we'll do for your newsletter, because it's smaller, we'll give you a bigger cut of the sales," where their typical deal is like 60/40, where for the sales
Oh,
that they
that's
do.
a pretty big cut.
Yeah, yeah, it's a pretty big cut where I would get 60% of the sale price, they would get 40%. For me, they did 70/30, where it's still a big cut, but it's really nice to not have to do the sales work because that is a lot of work to do. Um,
I thought the standard was closer to 20.
it probably is, but
Okay.
learning experiences.
Okay.
And so
Mhm,
yeah, um, but anyway, they give me a decent cut, and they've been able to do fairly high numbers where, like, they try to make the top number that they sell an issue for, 35.75, so, $3,575, so I get 70% of that. The number is not clicking right now, but a decent amount where I'm happy with it. And so they do go higher, but then they also have. I told them I never want to make less than a certain amount, and so they kind of say, "Okay, we'll do the sales in a way where you can get numbers that you're happy with, and we can still get a decent chunk ourselves." And though because it's a sales org, which I think this is a pro of it, but your mileage may vary, they'll bundle me in with other newsletters saying, "Okay,
mhm.
AWS, we know that you have this really big promo you want to come up with. We have 10 newsletters that you can sponsor that we represent. And so this is what the distribution would be." And then AWS will be like, "Cool, go." And so I am bundled in that. And I still get my same amount of money, but it helps them with their sales processes.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because when we were doing newsletter sponsorships, we didn't do just one, right? Like, you do, like, a bunch of them. So if you can go to an organization that sells a bunch at a time, that just makes the process a lot easier, so that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the hardest thing about being sponsored?
I think something that someone gave me advice on once was, it's better to give things away for free than to give things away for heavily discounted, because the
Oh, interesting.
people who want the heavy discounts are going to be the most pains in your butt. And that is so true. And I have experienced it where I didn't listen. And now I'm like, I will listen from now on. Where I think there's actually a meme somewhere where it's like, person who sponsors you for $500. "Okay, just so you know, I'm trusting you. I want to know all the numbers. This is what we're going to do. I'm so excited about this partnership, but I'm kind of nervous about it. Let's go." Person who sponsors you for $50,000, "Money sent. Thanks." And it's very true. Where everyone that I've let where they've said, "Oh, this is kind of actually pushing it for me. This is what I'm comfortable with." And I'll be like, "Okay, sure, let's do this." end up being such a pain where they're just like, I wasn't happy with the number of click-throughs though. And like they end up complaining about something, but then the people who are just like, oh, that was $3,000. Money sent. Thanks. Okay, we'll talk next time. It's very true. It's a very real thing. And so that is something worth considering. And I've seen there's a couple questions on like how much research and vetting do you do on companies, or can you veto a
Mhm.
sponsor? With the salespeople, yes, I can veto a sponsor. For me, I do a decent amount of research and vetting where like there have been times where I'm just like, it would just be nice to get paid, whatever. And it'll be like a crypto company where later I'm like, I don't know if I wanted to be associated with that. I'm not going to work with them again. Or someone who, once again, was frustrating to work with. There's elements of that. There's some companies where they've taken forever to pay me, and I'm just like, I'm not doing that again because it. There was one company where they literally took a year and a half to fulfill an invoice, which I don't know if that's legal, but whatever. And so anyway, the I do a somewhat decent amount of vetting, and I try to say like, by the way, my audience is engineering, and so like the salespeople, they said, what would you say to a Nike sponsorship? I'm just like, I'd like shoes, that'd be cool, but also I don't know if my audience is right for them, and so if there's an open slot, sure, let's just say we'll do Nike, great, but I don't know if they would get what they want out of it, and I don't want any bad blood or something. So there's it depends, I guess, is the best answer I can give to that.
What's the most you've made from a single sponsorship?
3,500.
Nice, nice. And is it mostly the newsletter that's sponsored, or do you have other things that you end up I know you
Yeah.
mentioned social
So
media as well.
yeah, and so I've done like sponsored streams before. I've done
Okay.
sponsored videos and stuff before, but and I think my favorite thing that I do is if someone says, "Oh, we want XYZ," I say, "Well, let's do like a bundle partnership where like I always try to make the newsletter like the first class citizen and then everything else is extra just because honestly, I'm already writing the newsletter. It's the least effort, quote unquote, for me.
Right.
But the best thing that I did once was with GitHub. And actually, I have exact numbers for that. Let me just open that up really quick so that way I
Yeah,
can
sure.
pull that up. 1 second. So I had a GitHub sponsor engagement, and this was they had 2 newsletter issues every month for 6 months. And so I tweeted per issue that they sponsored. I had like a thank you for sponsorship banner on my GitHub profile. I wrote 2 blog posts for them that were like big guides on something. I did like a 1 hour video interview with that was like really detailed with it included like a photo shoot and stuff, and then a podcast interview that was an hour, and all of that together I got 35K for that.
Shame. Okay. And how do you feel about that?
I
'Cause that
loved it,
honestly feels
honestly.
like a lot of work.
It was a lot of work, but with like, for example, adding the thank you copy, that is just like doing it
That's
and then it's
easy.
done.
Yeah.
The
Mhm.
newsletters, I was already doing that anyway. Really, the main things that was work was writing the 2 blog posts and doing the video and the podcast. Um,
Yeah. Same,
and
same.
so it was one of those things where it was a lot, but it felt fair enough. I was generally happy with it.
Feel like Kimberly Bryant would yell at you for that one.
She probably would.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you think about it, 2 newsletter issues every month for 6 months, that's 12 newsletters. Ooh, already. Oh, no.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. I would be yelled at for that, but
I would
still.
consider the podcast almost like a talk.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. No,
And
that's
then the
a
video?
good
Yeah.
point. Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually, I'll copy the bullet points into the chat too, so you could see all of it for 35K. Um, ooh, the bullet points did not format well. Well, there you go.
Okay.
But anyway, that was what it was, and yeah, now that I'm looking at it, I probably should have done more,
I
but
think you should've
at
gotten
the
at least, like,
time,
10K for that.
yeah, it was but it was 35K. So it
Yeah.
was like it felt good. It
Okay.
was one of those things where they were very easy to work with, and I think
Mhm.
that's why I liked that partnership the most because yes, I had newsletter sponsorships each week, but like for writing the blog posts for them, I got to choose the topic and they like helped me edit it. And like for the video interview, it was definitely time consuming, but
Yeah.
it was something where like, oh, because they had a photo shoot, I'm going to use those photos as my profile pictures now. That's where like I have a picture of me with the
Nice.
keyboard. That was from this
Oh,
partnership.
I love that photo. That is
Yeah,
such a good
exactly.
photo.
Yeah,
That's really
so anyway, like I felt like I got a good value out of it as well as getting paid for it.
and were they easy to work with? That's one thing that Will
Exactly.
asked.
That was the number one
Yeah,
thing. They were so easy to
good,
work with, and they were so
good, good.
casual where I would be like, "Okay, now I have to write a blog post for you guys. Do you mind if I do it next month?" They'd be like, "Oh, yeah, sure." Like, it was one of those things where they were like, "Money sent, thanks."
Yeah,
And it was nice.
yeah, yeah. Mira asked a really good question. If you want to get started in this world, do you first have to have a large following on social? Because that's true. I mean, you have, I think last time I checked, you had 17,000 subscribers on your newsletter. You've been doing your newsletter
Yeah.
for about 7 years now. What is kind of like, what are the prerequisites before you can start commanding these dollars and having these conversations?
I think you can do it earlier than you think, but it definitely helps. And I didn't always have a huge following on social media and stuff. I started getting the following. I know we mentioned TikToks before. I started getting the following because of TikToks, where I had around 10K followers for a very long time. And then when I started doing TikToks, I literally got 60,000 followers in 1 week when I started doing videos. Like it happened very fast
You
suddenly.
got
And
followers on Twitter
on
from your
Twitter,
TikTok videos?
yeah, from the TikTok
Oh,
videos,
wow.
because I would post the videos on Twitter as well as
Right.
TikTok. And granted, TikTok wasn't as popular then, so people were like, "Wow, what is this novel new thing? These short videos." And so I think it was, and it was the kind of thing where I was like trying to be funny and doing stuff before, but nothing really clicked until I started making videos. And I've definitely paused a lot since having a child. I want to pick it back up, but it's effort. But anyway, um, I think a following definitely can help, but you don't need it. I think with the right amount of working in public where people can see what you're about, companies are very happy to sponsor you in different ways where like it might be different amounts, but something for example, there's oh, what is it? There's one dev company I know where they are just like if someone wants to work with us to just like help us improve the product and like build a tutorial for us or whatever, we'll give them $250 for every blog post they write. And it's just like a carte blanche. They just do it for anybody. It doesn't matter what your following is. And they're not the only ones. They're just the ones I'm thinking of right now. I think it's Convex, maybe. Anyway, there are a lot of companies out there that pay you, and I think if you want to get started in this, like make your own content, make things that like are free and help establish you. But if you want to make content for others, there's actually a Disco Link Club member, Philip Keeley, where he made a website, whopaystechnicalwriters.com. I'm pasting it in the chat. Write blog posts for companies because they'll pay you per blog post anyway, and it's a really good start where you can just pitch an article. Like I host the Stack Overflow podcast, and I've been writing their newsletter since it started, which stemmed from my newsletter. Actually, they saw it and they said, "Hey, do this for us." But
For that too,
they
we should
what?
say. You get paid for that too, right?
I do.
Writing that
I do get
newsletter?
paid for that.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
But for their blog, they always do a call saying, "Hey, we want more posts on AI this month," or "Hey, we're having a gap on GraphQL. Could someone write for it?" They put out calls all the time on the podcast and in various like socials and stuff where you just say, "Hey, this is a general article I want to write," and just pitch it to them, and they'll be like, "Okay, great," and then they'll pay you for it.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. So let's talk about some of these videos. You have some
Sure.
hilarious videos on TikTok. I know you've also posted them on Twitter. Where do your ideas for your videos and your memes, where do they come from?
My weird brain. Um, Honestly, I think I for a long time I truly just had a post-it note where like as if I'm like debugging something or something weird happens, I'm like, this could be a joke. And I'll just like write it down and then later if a video comes to me, I'll be like, okay, sure, I'll make one for that. Where I think really it would be just like whenever I approach something, I often think about how can I make it into some kind of pun or joke, which is not how most people think, but that is often how I think about things in general. And so I think by just kind of gearing my head in that direction, it has helped me kind of just improve my humor brain a little bit over time. Where
Humor brain.
I
That's
took,
great.
I actually took a humor writing class,
Oh,
and yeah, which it truly just like I was like, I should try to be funnier, right? I
cool.
like humor, and I let's see, I think it was writingclasses.com. Yeah, exactly. It was writingclasses.com. I'm pasting it in the chat. Um, in their Gotham Writers, they have courses both in person and online. And so a while back, I was still living in New York City. I took one of their in person courses where it was just general humor writing. And
Mm,
it felt like kind of just an English class, but it was just like these are the things that people find funny. There's like shock humor where something unexpected happens, or there's okay, you kind of twist this into something unexpected. Just things like that. And as a result, now when I approach things, I try to think of it from a different angle that could be generally amusing, and that helps both my writing and video creation stuff. Yeah, that's my
yeah.
answer.
Yeah, when you think about those memes, those videos, those funny tweets, what's the objective? Are you thinking of an idea and going, "Ooh, this is gonna go viral. Like, this is gonna be the thing that's gonna get me some followers?" Is it purely from a place of a creative outlet? Like, what's the motivation behind the things that are not obviously sponsorable or sellable?
Yeah, I think it's more about making people laugh and be just like, like a combination of making people laugh and making people feel like they're not alone and stuff. Because most of the videos that I've made and most of the content I make is either like some kind of tutorial thing or me making fun of a thing that happens at work that kind of sucks in some way, and showing like you're not alone in this. Where like one of them that a lot of people share is like when your boss says, "Hey, can we chat?" And I'm just like, "Is this how I die?" Like it's some silly video. So many people send that to me, be just like, "My manager sent that to me today," and it's just like one of those things where it's like, "You're not alone. That sucks."
Yeah,
Or like one of the things that will always be with you no matter what is a cores error, because it's true. You will always see cores errors throughout your career, and so
yeah,
making things like that, like a lot of it is trying to kind of relate to people, make them laugh and stuff, because tech is honestly a very stoic industry. Tech code is very cut and dry, basically applied math. And so
yeah.
adding some humanness into it, I feel like is helpful to humans and makes it more fun.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really good point. Bria asked a really good question. What motivates you to do so many things and bring in streams of income? Do you ever have lulls in motivation? I think that's such a great question because you've been doing this for like your whole career, right? For as long as you've been in
Mhm.
tech, you've been creating, building, making, doing some extra thing. How has your motivation fluctuated or changed over that time?
It goes up and down daily, it feels like. Like there are some days where I'm just like, I'm not gonna do any of this today. I'm just gonna watch some Netflix, maybe play some guitar, do like just do something else. And then sometimes I have bursts of motivation where like this week I'm going to ship 3 things. And I feel like I have enough projects that are just staggered out. It looks like I'm shipping something all the time, but really it's more I started this project like 3 years ago and I'm finally actually finishing it because the motivation does come and go. And there are some things where I'm more disciplined, like my newsletter, the Stack Overflow newsletter, and just sometimes streaming. I'm kind of taking a break from streaming till I start a full time job again. But like other things, it really just motivation goes up and down, and I think seeing that I provide value to people is what makes me particularly excited about it. If I'm just focused on the this is going to make money, I tend to be more stressed out about it. um, I do really think about, and once again I probably should have a mindset shift. I really do think about money as like this is an added bonus of me doing this thing that's fun. Which once again I'm trying to figure out the mindset shift on that. But when I am just fully motivated on like, okay, I need to do XYZ and then it will make me money and this is the goal, then I end up just not liking it as much, which is why I haven't gone full time as like a content creator because even though I know it will make money, I know then I will have a lot less fun doing it.
Let's talk about that because I know that, this community and what we focus on is more of the side hustle, more of the things you do on the side to bring in extra money. Maybe one day it'll become your full-time job, but maybe you're not quite there yet. And there's so
Mm.
many different ways that there's so many different places you can put your energy to. So how do you decide of all the things that we've listed, we've talked about all the places where your time and energy can go, how do you decide where to invest?
I wish I had a proper framework to tell you because I don't know if I really do. I truly like, I have a piece of paper where I generally have a to do list, and sometimes I do this list and sometimes I don't. It just kind of depends on my vibe. Where like I should be more methodical, but I don't. It's more like not necessarily what's on fire right now, but what could be generally improved right now. Or like one thing that I've been putting off because it kind of sounds boring, but I should do is updating my newsletter like splash page where people can subscribe. I should say thousands of developers use this. Check it
Yeah.
out, stuff like that. You gave me some advice. Other people in Disco Link Club gave me advice, and yet I haven't followed it yet because I just haven't done it, even though I should do it. Um, I think it's hard to answer that because it's I don't really have a good framework for it.
Mhm. How do you balance the money part from the joyful creation part, right? It feels like, I mean, even to the point that you made earlier, if you were doing all this creator stuff full time, you'd probably burn out and it probably just wouldn't be as much fun. So when you're thinking about how to spend your time, your energy, how do you balance wanting to get paid for stuff that you do with just wanting
Mm.
to put something out there and create it for the sake of creation?
I kind of try to just break up my schedule a little bit where I'm just like, okay, prioritize the things where I will get paid and then leave time for like the fun free things and everything because I do really like giving things away for free. I think it's just more fun when people are just like, "Ooh, cool, a good resource." I do genuinely really like it. But I am trying to be better at prioritizing where like for example, I have a paid contract right now and I have like two side projects that I really want to ship. I try to do the paid contracts in the first half of the day and then the more fun things in the second half of the day or whatever time slot I have. And if I don't leave enough time for the fun things, then I'm just not I'm not as motivated. I'm not having as much of a fun time. So I do try to dedicate time to the free fun things so that the paid stuff doesn't bog me down in one way or another. And sometimes the paid stuff is fun, but the free stuff tends to be more fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The next question is kind of putting together a bunch of different questions that people submitted when they RSVP'd for this live stream. This is coming from Wayne, Morian, Yufa, Christina, Temerlen, and Jordana. So they asked some variation of this question, but basically it's around burnout and around just
Mm,
productivity and figuring out how do you create such a high volume of such high quality without burning out while keeping up with your daughter. I think she's not quite 2, right? A year and
yeah,
some
she's
change.
15 months. Yeah.
15 months. Yeah, so you got a little toddler running around. So how do you kind of get it all done and keep your motivation and your just spirit up?
Yeah. So, first of all, I think that being a parent has made me so much more efficient with my time. We're
Amen.
so
Yes.
much more efficient. Like, I don't
I
think I
get
really
so much more done.
so much more done. I think I'm just like forced to be like, okay, she's napping. I have 45
Yeah,
minutes.
we
Like,
got 2 hours. Let's go.
yeah, exactly. So, like, I wasted so much more time before. So there's that element of it. But also, I
Yeah.
think there's a framework that I use, and we'll probably talk about it more in our future workshop. But where it's kind of a graph of like things you like to do, things you don't like to do, things you're good at, things you're not good at, and then kind of just straight up writing it down and filling in those quadrants. When you do things that you like to do and you're good at, you don't really burn out on those because burnout happens more when you're doing something that doesn't align with your values, it, rather than things that you actually like to do. I could work forever on stuff that I like to do because it's just fun. Or if I'm figuring out a cool coding question, or I'm working on a project that I'm really excited about, I'm not going to burn out on it because it's genuinely interesting to me. But
Mm.
if I'm working on something that it's something that I don't really like to do, or something that I'm not that good at, and so it's a kind of an uphill battle, that's when the burnout starts to happen. And or if it's something where it's going towards something that I just don't find valuable, it's that's when it happens. And so I think the way I avoid burnout is I just try to do things that align with what matters to me.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to talk about collaborations because we talked about
Mm,
sponsorships, which is like you make a piece of usually a piece of content, and they pay you to put their name on that content, right? But you've also done like different kinds of collaborations with people, with organizations. I know you've done some course collaborations. I think you've done some other content collaborations. What other kinds of collaborations that aren't explicit partnerships have you done? What are like the other ways you've made money?
let's see. So I mentioned my podcast that I did before, with Launch Darkly. That one was a collaboration with a friend of
Yeah.
mine where the two of us were like, let's host this show together. Um, there have been times too where pretty much every time I do like a live stream with another human, it will very often be some kind of sponsored partnership of some kind.
Nice. Nice, nice.
Where like I've I don't think I've ever actually done a stream with someone on my own channel that wasn't some kind of paid partnership. Where I've yeah the yeah I'll stick with that answer. Um, I'm trying to think of other unusual ones that you haven't mentioned. I feel like a lot of times it's just like a company will DM me saying, "Hey, will you tweet about our company? If you do, we'll give you XYZ," or something like that. And that happens a lot. But or like once again, we kind of do a co-marketing thing where, hey, if your newsletter shouts out my newsletter, I will shout out your newsletter or something like
Yeah, you
that.
do a little
Where it's like a
swap.
co-marketing
Yeah.
thing, a swap. Um, yeah, that's those are the partnerships that I can think of off the top of my head right now.
Tell me about courses. How does it work to do
Yeah,
courses? Because I know that there are people who launch courses on their own platform. They use Teachable or like a
sure.
Kajabi or something, and they're kind of doing their own thing. But you've actually launched courses on other people's platforms, right? You mentioned
Right.
O'Reilly. I know you've done Scrimba. Have you done Egghead,
I haven't done Egghead. I've done Skillshare.
Skillshare? How
What
do
else have I
those
done?
types of relationships work?
So all the platforms are different, and I feel like I've just tried all of them to see what sticks. So with something like O'Reilly, that's like a more traditional learning platform, they sometimes give you an advance and then they just pay you depending on how many people take your course. And I don't remember the exact percentages I have for that because it's been a long time. With Scrimba, they gave me an advance of $20,000, and
Okay.
then they said, once the 20,000, and that's they called it like pre royalties. And then beyond that,
Interesting.
when people, if once people took the course beyond that $20,000 mark, then I would just get paid monthly. But then they ended up buying that out where they're just like, hey, we don't want to deal with this kind of accounting anymore. So we're going to give you $1,000 and buy. And so I
Oh,
get
wow.
nothing. So now if someone takes my course,
Okay.
happy for them. I don't make anything from that anymore. Um, Skillshare and Egghead both have the model of being kind of like Netflix for courses,
Okay.
where you
Yep.
subscribe and it's on there and you get paid per second someone watches your course.
Per
Um,
second.
yeah, I think it's per second.
Interesting.
I or 30 seconds. I think it's less than a minute. But anyway, so they're designed to be shorter courses, but
Right.
people are gaming the system when they have like, this is my introduction to how to draw a tree with Procreate, something like that. That's because they want you in there so they can get paid more. And
It's
with
funny.
with Skillshare, I did my like first test course was how to play Go, like the board game, because I wanted to just kind of see what it was like uploading videos to that. And then my next course was like how to build a personal website. Um, and Also, Will said a 1K to buy out sounds cheap. It was. I've learned my lesson. But with Skillshare, across those 2 courses, I think the most I've ever made in a given month was $120. I don't make a lot of money. But if you if you build a following on Skillshare, you make so much money. Where
Really?
a friend of mine, he has made, I think, 3 Skillshare courses that are very polished and are like how to use Notion effectively. Where, like, again, mine are very 2 unrelated short courses where I was just trying it out. He made 3, I think, hour-long courses and like
Wow.
really promoted it. He used like the nice cameras, he had everything set up. He makes something wild like 90 grand a month from that. I know, big numbers. So something like that, like it's you can make a lot if you game the system well. And also something about Skillshare is they have just a living Google presentation that's somewhere like in the footer or like in the teaching category. I couldn't tell you where it is, but look for it. That says in demand topics, and it's constantly updated.
Oh,
So you could be like, oh, I could teach this Python thing, or oh, I could teach this drawing thing, something like that. And so that's a good one for ideating on courses. Egghead, they also have another branch, quote unquote, that they're leaning more into now, where they make like bespoke courses where they work with a course creator to make really big epic courses. And I use the word epic because Kent C. Dodds made Epic React, and then he has like Epic Web Dev and like JavaScript testing. With those, they also had some kind of royalty deal, and I'm trying to remember the exact numbers. I want to say it was like pretty big numbers, like 50-50, where
oh wow.
their crew made a lot of money and Kent made about half of it or so. But they did everything, like production, marketing, the website for the courses, everything very, very bespoke. But they make money. They're very good at marketing courses. Where when Epic React came out, they made $1 million in 1 week. Lots of effort. And I've talked with Kent about the Epic Web Dev stuff, and he was saying like, well, it's yes, Will, it's that one. Kent was saying like, I want more people to be contributing to it, so it's not just the Kent show all the time, but I get the final say on like how the content is taught. I will re-record it and do it myself if I don't like how you did it. And like he is very like, I want it to be perfect, and I respect that. They're making a lot of money. It's a whole business. There's that. Another person who made a course like fully on his own was Josh Camo. I think that's how his last name is pronounced. And he used to work at Gatsby, and he made a CSS course. I want to say it's called Modern CSS. And then he also made a React course, and he built the course platform by himself. He probably
Yeah.
could have used a Teachable or something, but he built it all by himself, where he made it so you could have text, he had video, he had things where you could highlight to take notes, all kinds of stuff. He's a delightful guy. He was also very open about how much money he made. And I think in his first week of pre-orders for his CSS course, he made $530,000 or something. Absurd amounts of money. So
Woo! All right.
a lot of money in courses, but it depends on how much effort you put into it. I haven't put in the nearly as much effort as these guys have, and I probably should. I really should, because that's so much money. But it is like their full time thing. Like that is what they dedicate to those courses, and so that is the general mix. That I don't think I missed any other course platforms for that.
That is really inspiring.
Oh, I did remember one last one, Front
Yeah.
End Masters. Front End Masters
Yeah,
is
yeah.
really good, where they also do like an advanced royalty thing. They're very strict on the look and feel of their courses, where they typically fly you out to Minneapolis and you actually teach it to like a live audience, and then they make the videos of it. In the pandemic, and sometimes for some people, they'll literally send you like a backdrop and a podium and things because they want it to look geared towards it. But I know multiple people who say that Front End Masters pays their mortgage. So there you go.
Right. So if you are doing a course, if you're thinking about taking all of your tech skills, your tech expertise, and turning it into money and thinking about courses as a way to do that, when would it make sense to go with one of these platforms? And when does it make sense to just go straight to Teachable and try to do your own thing? What would you recommend?
I think something like Teachable or doing your own thing is great when you have a brand, because then people already know what to expect from you and stuff. If you did something like Udemy, which honestly I don't recommend Udemy anymore because you're not going to get paid that much. You just won't. Um, it
Your courses are
there
permanently discounted to like $10. So
exactly.
like
Like I remember I was just like, oh, I'll charge $15 for my React course, which once again I should have charged so much more money, but what can you do? They were just like, oh no, charge more than that. And so they said, okay, your course will be $140. And I was like, that's a lot of money to ask of someone to learn like these things. Once again, I've learned my lesson. But they're just like, grand majority of people will pay $9 for this course. And I was like, oh, I see. And that's just kind of the expectation. So I don't think I've ever bought a non-discounted course on Udemy. Exactly. That's just kind of how it is. But when you do use like a Udemy or an Egghead or a Skillshare or something, your course is in the network and
yeah.
like they do the ads for you. And with Udemy, for example, and I know Skillshare does something similar, but I don't remember. Um, if someone buys your course and you promote it, it was like a 90-10 split where you get 90% of the money, they get 10%. If it's via an ad that they made, then it's like a they get 70% and you get 30%. If it's just on the website, it's closer to 50-50. Those are generally the numbers, but there you just won't get paid as much, but you can kind of start establishing yourself. I know because of how Udemy is set up and how people have gamed the system. I know there's one guy on Udemy where I actually called him out on it because I was like, this feels wrong, but I guess more power to you, where he has something like 70 courses on Udemy. But what I found out later, after like just doing research and stuff, he doesn't actually teach all of those courses. What he does is he records the intro and the conclusion, and then he pays a random person to teach the content. And the way he pitches it to them is they're just like he's like, I'll get your name out there and then we'll split the money. But he's ends up making so much money on that. And so like there's ways to game the system in that way. But I think if I were to make like a random throwaway course of just like a small thing, I would probably do Skillshare again just because it was very easy to upload a video and then it's done. If I wanted to do something where I'm just like, no, this is going to be like a workshop where I make money, I'd do something like Front End Masters because they also have the network, but it's a bit more established, especially in the tech space. And then doing something on like a Teachable, I would rely on my network for that.
So when you think about starting and reaching out to these platforms, is there like a form you fill out? Like how do you get like if I want to be on front end masters, do I email somebody? Like how does that work?
Yeah, so you basically write up a pitch, and a lot
Okay.
of these platforms actually have like a document that you fill out. Like
Oh, great.
when I did the one with O'Reilly, they straight up sent me a spreadsheet where they said write down like all of the units or topics that you'll hit and like broken up by category, generally how long you estimate each of those topics will hit, and then like a brief summary of that. That was a bit more involved, but it's like that for most places where you come up with some kind of outline thing and then pitch it to them and then they'll say like, yes, we could use that on our platform, or no, we've already got this kind of thing covered. For something like Front End Masters, that's how it is. With Skillshare, they have like regular cohorts, like monthly, where they onboard new instructors. Where you could just do it like a YouTube video where you upload it and just do it self-serve. But if you join one of the cohorts, then they can help you with some marketing and extra like perks. Where it's like, hey, the person who uploads their outline for their course first gets a gift card or something like that. Like
Yeah.
they have like ways to motivate teachers there.
Right, right, right. Okay, got you, got you. Okay, so in our last 9 minutes, I want to circle back to that blog post you wrote. Now that we've kind of discovered and explored some of your side hustles and how you approach money and how much money you've made, I would love to talk about how you describe your relationship to money today. What does that look like?
How do I describe my relationship to money? I should ask for more of it. I think like that's really the summary of it. Where like I feel like I'm still very much a noob at it, even though like you're right, I do have a lot of sponsors and I have done things, but I do feel like I've kind of been walking in the woods blindfolded, trying to figure out like, okay, this path seems generally good. Where I don't know if I follow any rules particularly correctly. I've just kind of been trying, and I feel like Disco Link Club has been really good for learning a lot sooner, and kind of picking things up faster, and figuring out like, okay, this is reasonable, this is not reasonable, this is advice from one person, things that I can take into account. Um, but I think it's still complicated for me. It feels like I'm still a baby in the money making space.
And I want to comment on this one conversation that I think the screenshot was from Twitter. It was talking
Mm,
about your W-9 tracker, this app that you made earlier this year. And you wrote, it took a lot of people actually telling me that this was worth money to actually believe it. It's wild. I'm now wondering how much I've missed out on, I admit. And then Ryan Florence responded, literally millions in your case, I'd wager. And then Jay Hooks from Egghead said, I'd agree. And you responded, oh no.
yeah, yeah.
Tell
Oh
me more about
no.
that. Why? Oh, how did it feel to get that response from Ryan?
uh, Both flattering and also, I think "oh no" really encompasses a lot of it. Where like it's one of those things where you just don't know until you know. Like I didn't know I could get paid to speak until someone told me. I didn't even like how I got into the industry was me not knowing. I found out because a neighbor was building a website and I was like, wait, you could have one of those? Like, there's so many things you just don't know until you ask. And
Mhm.
in this particular case, like I talked about earlier with how much money I could be getting from sponsorships, earlier when I talked about how much money I could get from speaking, there's a lot of things you just aren't aware of until people talk about it, which is why I like talking with you and all the stuff that you're doing, because it's bringing exposure to this topic that is very taboo. And I think I again, I'm kind of going through this mindset shift of like, Linda, I think is saying it well. It's everything I do probably has value. Weird. And then figuring out how to do it. And again, I still like giving things for free and know that like not everybody can afford things, and so trying to find that balance there. And it's also hard too because I know that like I'm so privileged to be in the tech industry where like we have good salaries and stuff, and I often think like I don't need the money. Like I luckily have a roof over my head and a salary that can cover it, but I'm still doing free work. It's like such a complex thing that is rough. And so I'm definitely in a weird space with it where I think I'm still growing and learning.
When you think about your daughter and raising her to really know her worth, her financial worth at least, um, what do you plan on teaching her about money?
Good question. Man, that's a hard one because I think about that a lot. Where like it, I want her to be very aware that she is living in a pretty privileged household where both my husband and I work in tech and have good roles, but our families didn't necessarily come from a lot. We luckily both kind of stumbled into this industry that has done well for us, and we're able to give back in a lot of different ways, and it's important for us to give back. And so I really just hope for her that she learns generosity more than anything,
Mm.
because I think that is more important than what you can make. I think that you should be able to make stuff for your work so you can be generous, but I
Mm.
do think that the number one thing would be for her to be a generous person.
When you think about, the potential millions that you could have missed you might have missed out on, where do you think it could have come from if you had only known, right? Is it that you were
Mm.
undercharging the whole time? Is it that there are certain products that you gave away for free that you should have charged? Where do you think is the missing money?
All of the above. Um, yeah, so first of all, a lot of the educational resources I've provided, grand majority of them still are free. People probably could have paid me for that. And I know that like that's Joel Hooks's perspective because he has said like we could make this course or we could make XYZ and probably make a lot of money. And like timing didn't work out for whatever reason. Like I think there's quite a few courses that I could have made paid a whole lot more. Um, but then I also think, yeah, like honestly, my newsletter probably could be a paid resource. People have told me that it could be paid, but at the same time, I'm nervous about excluding people by making it paid. And so I'm trying to figure out like that balance with that. I think my not wanting to exclude people because of things being paid probably contributes to that. And also just not having the confidence of a white man to just like make an online course and sell it for ridiculous amounts of money.
I just realized that all the examples you gave, I think they were all white men, weren't they? All
Yeah.
the Joel Hooks and the Joshes and
Yeah,
the Kens and Brads. Yeah.
pretty much everybody. Kimberly Bryan is the only person that I think I've mentioned with the wake up calls, but because every other person was a white man saying, "Well, of course, you just make this." And I'm like, "You do? Like you don't know."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right. Well, we are just about out of time, but I wanted to let you all know that Cassidy is doing a workshop on productivity. As you know, she is extremely productive. She creates so much stuff and creates so many pieces of content, her newsletter, the podcast, the other newsletter, her tweets, her videos, her live streams, just so many things. And she's going to teach us all how to do it and how to be productive and how to get the work that we want to get done, the stuff that we never seem to have quite enough time for, how to get those done. So she's going to help us all with that. That is coming up on August 27 at I believe it's going to be 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern time. If you are a member of Disco Link Club, it is free for you as part of your membership. So if you are not a member, you're welcome to join. It's application based, but it is free. So go ahead, go over to discolink.com and check out the join the club link and learn more. Cassidy, any final words of wisdom for all the people here who are hoping to make money and hoping to be smart about it, might be a little bit scared? Any final words of wisdom for them?
I think the main thing that I didn't touch on enough, but is a big one, is if you don't ask, you don't get. And asking a lot of questions of people, you'd be surprised some of the answers that you get. And so keep asking questions, and chances are the worst thing they'll say is no. If you want to have certain sponsorships, do certain things, get in certain events, that's that kind of thing.
Wonderful, beautiful, love it. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, Cassidy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for being here.